The police escalation. The door opened, and this time it wasn't another teacher or administrator stepping through. A police officer filled the frame, uniform crisp, badge catching the fluorescent light. His presence shifted the entire temperature of the room. Hushed whispers from the hall softened, like everyone outside had been waiting for this moment. Up to now, it had been faculty concern and awkward explanations. Now it was procedure. Authority had arrived. The officer crossed the room with deliberate calm, setting a small notebook on the desk before lowering himself into the chair opposite. He didn't rush. Every movement read as measured, like someone used to projecting steadiness during tense situations. And from his job's perspective, anything labeled as an attack plan found on school grounds would raise red flags. Parents and staff might panic in their own ways, but for law enforcement, the protocol was written: investigate as if it were real, no matter how absurd the context. "Sir," the officer began, voice even but heavy, "we need to discuss the files on this device." He shifted the tablet forward an inch and rested his hand near it, leaving a pause that demanded acknowledgement. The father nodded faintly, adjusting his glasses, heart already pounding faster. The officer tapped the screen and opened the list of folders. Each name appeared under the harsh office light: Attack Plan B, Exploit Run Final, Payload Test. He read them aloud in slow sequence, almost theatrically, each term landing heavier than the last. The father cringed at the sound of his own carelessness played back with official weight. What had been sloppy shorthand scribbled at midnight was now evidence under review. "They're familiar?" the officer asked, his tone making the simple question feel sharper than it was. "Yes," the father admitted, keeping his voice steady. "They're part of my job: cybersecurity demos, stress test drills. They're training slides, not instructions." He reached for simplicity, not jargon. The last thing he wanted was to hear himself say payload or penetration test in this room. But even stripped to its basics, his explanation sagged under pressure. Think of them: the way schools run fire drills, practice versions of problems that don't exist. The words hung there. The officer's brow lifted slightly, not hostile, but unconvinced. He jotted a few quick notes without breaking eye contact. That gesture burned more than any spoken accusation. The officer turned the screen again. A page filled edge to edge with green text and numbers scrolled downward in endless streams. To the father, it was nothing. Random filler code for demonstration, like watching a calculator churn out meaningless equations. But set against the backdrop of a third-grade classroom, he suddenly understood why the teachers reacted the way they had. Rows of undecipherable symbols might as well be an alien transmission to anyone unfamiliar. "What's this meant to be?" the officer asked, his voice flat, probing. He rubbed a hand over his forehead before answering. "Just encryption output. Random characters. It doesn't say anything, it can't. There's no message hidden here." But in that moment, even he understood how poorly the words sounded strung together. Asterisk, randomized codes. Concealed. Nonsense. Asterisk. They were true phrases, but true phrases sometimes only worsen suspicion. He tried again. It's like practice math problems. They don't add up to meaning on their own. Another line scratched into the notebook. Another silence. He wished desperately for the context of a conference room, a projector, a crowd of peers who actually spoke his language. Here, the terminology fumbled like evidence turning in someone else's hands. What gnawed at him most wasn't the misunderstanding itself, it was that the mess had sprung from his own casual habits. Those folder names had been never meant for public eyes, never polished. Attack Plan had been a joke to himself, not an actual plan. Exploit was just a placeholder in a sandbox file. Yet carelessness had painted him as something darker. The irony seared in one sharp realization. He had spent years warning clients that vague or sloppy documentation could cause serious confusion. Now he sat facing the direct consequence of it, exposed by his own shortcuts. The officer leaned back, his hands folded over the notebook. His tone softened, but the words still pressed firmly. "You understand how this would appear to anyone unfamiliar." The staff reported real worry. My responsibility is to treat that seriously. And he did understand, at least on some level. To adults standing in front of a room full of children, those words, attack, exploit, payload, weren't technical pointers. They were hazards. Onlookers had acted out of genuine concern, not malice. Still, it didn't drain the sting. Every step of this felt outsized and absurd from his perspective, solvable in seconds if only context were granted. But protocol is slow and deliberate. And paranoia, once sparked, doesn't vanish by explanation alone. Silence lingered again. He sat straighter, willing himself calm. Arguing here would do nothing but carve suspicion deeper. He replayed a familiar principle from his own field. When tension builds and systems falter, the best action is sometimes restraint. Finally, the officer closed the tablet with a softened click and set it aside within reach of his palm. His conclusion came simple and unbent. Until this matter is fully reviewed, the device stays in custody. That phrase landed with unexpected weight. The word custody wasn't just about an object. It dragged permanence behind it. A locked process had begun, one he couldn't rewind or laugh off later. He nodded stiffly, already picturing the fallout, the explanations, the sideways glances, the slippery gossip that feeds quickly in school parking lots. Beyond the walls of that office, whispers were already spreading. And among the crowd, one teacher in particular would soon prove that fear could turn into pure theater if given the right spotlight. But that came later. For now, all he could hear was the echo of that closing phrase: the device remains in custody. The teacher's overreaction. If every school has one teacher who can turn a stubbed toe into a full-scale emergency, this was her stage. She swept into the office, shoulders squared, chin held high, the kind of body language that announced she had uncovered something monumental. The other teachers gave her the floor without contest, happy to let her narrate the event with all the drama she clearly felt it deserved. The father sat still, preparing for what he knew was about to be a performance that would stretch the bounds of reason. She leaned across the table, palms pressed flat as though steadying herself to testify in court. "The moment I saw what your child opened on that screen," she began, pausing for affect, "I knew immediately something was deeply wrong. This wasn't just a folder. This wasn't just a digital assignment. This was something larger." Her words drew out in a rhythm meant for an audience. The names, the symbols. It was as if a government document had been placed in front of second graders. Her voice rose, her breath catching at certain phrases. "I cannot emphasize enough. It looked like dangerous material, something no child should ever be exposed to." The officer sat silently beside her, face neutral, but his steady nod made the weight of her words hang heavier than before. To her, this was her defining act, the dramatic moment where she had stepped between innocence and threat. For him, sitting opposite, the exaggeration veered into absurdity. Hand-drawn firewall diagrams were being recounted as though they were Cold War cipher sheets. Training slides with cartoon arrows were cast as classified intelligence. He did not interrupt. He simply bent his head slightly, breathing through his nose, letting his silence serve as commentary. Any protest now would only paint him as defensive, and he could already sense that in this room, the story mattered more than the facts. Her gaze flicked down, then back up, as if reliving the scene gripped her more tightly the longer she spoke. The children looked frightened. She continued, "I had to shield the device with my coat, to keep the display hidden until I could get it away. In that moment, I felt responsible, protecting the classroom from a kind of exposure none of us were prepared to face." She pressed her hand to her chest, whispering that she might even need counseling to recover. Around her, a couple of teachers gave slow nods, their faces drawn long with sympathy, as if she had endured something traumatic rather than opened a mislabeled spreadsheet. In the hallway outside, fragments of her words already leaked out. A nearby staffer had lowered her voice to the art teacher, who then passed the tone of alarm toward the lunchroom monitor, who in turn carried fragments into the carpool line. By the time the final bell rang, Versions of the story would be bouncing between minivans like an echo chamber. A child had brought classified codes or plans straight into a classroom. The father could see it happening as she spoke, the rumor cycle living and breathing just beyond the office door. Her expression stayed fixed with conviction, which was the part that made it sting. She was not inventing flair. She genuinely believed danger had been intercepted inside her classroom. That unwavering belief, paired with the comical nature of the files, gave her speech its twisted power. Parents watching might have understood. It was the classic intensity a teacher carried for every crisis. A forgotten lunch becomes a story of heroics. A lost sweater turns into a parable about preparedness. Now it was his files carrying the weight of her witness stand delivery. He tried once to explain, careful and slow. He told her the labels were not plans but sample material, teaching tools for training. He used the most stripped-down analogy he could, that they were like mock fire drills, practice for problems that weren't real. But his words landed without traction. Eyes didn't soften. Faces didn't ease. In this room, it wasn't the files being judged anymore. It was him, the one who had created them in the first place. That truth tightened a knot in his chest. To them, it summed up everything, and he knew it would be repeated long after this meeting ended. Colleagues would mention it, parents would rehearse it, neighbors might whisper it. It was a label ready to attach itself to him, regardless of what he said. The officer's pen scratched softly against paper. The others stayed silent, letting the words settle. The teacher finally leaned back, folding her hands neatly, satisfied like a performer who had delivered her climax. Her point had landed, heavy and durable enough to outlast explanation. And now, with that phrase, a hacker's toolkit hanging in the air, the tension inside the office shifted again. What came next would not just be staff whispering or a teacher's dramatic retelling. Something outside the school was now about to pull him further into the tangle. Into the mom and the secrets on the tablet. His phone buzzed again on the desk, and this time the name flashing across the screen was the one he least wanted to see. It wasn't the school, and it wasn't the officer. It was his wife. He hesitated for 2 rings before answering, as though the delay might soften what he already knew was coming. Her voice cut sharp the moment she spoke. "Where's my tablet? Please tell me you didn't send Tommy to school with it." He closed his eyes, guilt weighing heavier than any accusation so far. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "It was closer than his. I didn't realize." Silence followed, but it wasn't the kind that meant forgiveness. He recognized it instantly, the pause before she enumerated exactly how catastrophic this mistake was for their family. When she finally broke it, her tone was flat and clipped. He'd assumed it was just another work machine filled with reports or meeting notes. But the urgency in her voice told him otherwise. "It's not illegal," she said quickly, lowering her voice but not her intensity. "But it's personal. I don't need the principal, the police, or half the PTA flipping through it." His throat went dry. Criminal suspicion he could battle with evidence. Embarrassment, though, that lingered, etched into social memory. It wasn't espionage she was worried about. It was humiliation. Bit by bit, she laid it out. Her tablet wasn't simply a work device. It carried layers of her ordinary private clutter, shopping boards with dream room furniture, playlist clips she replayed when no one else was home, journals of half-finished private notes. Nothing dangerous. Just fragile things, never meant for other eyes, suddenly exposed in the harshest way possible. He pictured the scene, teachers huddled over the device like they had stumbled upon classified data, scrolling through saved carts of pillows and screenshots of recipes. The image was horrifying and hilarious in equal measure. But for his wife, it was no joke. To her, it wasn't just material, it was reputation. He groaned softly, realizing the real crisis had shifted. Up to this point, he'd been defending sloppy file names and training slides. Now, the real live wire was his wife's digital footprint. His professional pride could survive suspicion, but her secrets, reshaped by staff whispers and parent gossip, would shred them socially before they ever set foot in a boardroom. I'll make it sound technical. No, her response was sharp. You don't make it better with tech talk. You'll only make it worse. Just don't. He clenched his jaw, knowing she was right. Rationalizing nonsense already hadn't worked with the officer. Any fumbling explanation about playlists disguised as simulation environments would make them both look absurd. Around him, the office chair felt smaller, his body pressing against its edges. He could handle the thought of police review. The law worked on evidence. But the school system, parents, teachers, they worked on perception. And once teachers believed they'd uncovered something, perception hardened into fact. The thought of one mother whispering in the carpool line, "Did you hear what was on her iPad?" was more terrifying than any formal accusation. It dawned on him that this wasn't just a professional mess or a marriage dispute, it was a full community event. Now, the items on that device had no criminal weight, but the comedic absurdity of them gave the crisis staying power. Out of place, out of context, even basic lists looked theatrical. His wife's playlists were now artifacts. Her shopping collections were evidence. Teachers convinced of danger would see danger even in decoration notes. The harder he thought about that paradox, the worse it became. Police read everything with suspicion. Teachers framed everything with drama. Now she was terrified everything would be turned into gossip fuel. He was stuck in the middle, powerless to rewrite any of it. Her voice broke the silence again, tense but calm enough to carry meaning. "You need to get my tablet back before anyone else looks at it." He nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I'll try." The words fell flat. The principal still loomed outside the door, the officer still jotting in his notebook, and the tablet sat sealed in a box like a biohazard container. His wife's demand felt impossible, but refusing wasn't an option. He rubbed his temples, the weight of it pressing harder. This day had started with digital confusion over files. Now, it stretched into personal territory with no easy escape. In his field, evidence spoke louder than speculation. But in this building, speculation ruled, and the evidence, everything from a mislabeled chart to a playlist folder, was only pouring gas on rumor. From the hallway came the familiar sound of the principal's footsteps, firm against tile, moving back toward the office. He knew what that signified. The questions weren't over. Whatever verdict the school felt entitled to deliver was about to arrive. He slid his phone back onto the desk. His wife's clipped words still ringing in his ears. She wanted her privacy intact, her normal habits shielded from the parade of suspicion. But privacy wasn't in his control anymore. It had passed into the hands of people convinced they were handling an emergency. The door creaked open, and all conversation cut back to silence. The officer folded his arms. The principal's expression was heavier now, her posture carrying the air of someone preparing final words. And in that stillness, he realized their roles had shifted. They weren't parents sitting with explanations anymore. They were about to be called back into the room, together, like defendants awaiting judgment. The principal's final judgment. The principal called them back into her office, and the air shifted as soon as they stepped inside. Bright light forced its way in through half-open blinds, chairs placed precisely in front of her desk. No warm welcome, no casual greeting, just formality. She stood behind the desk with an expression trained into stillness, her tone neutral in a way that felt more unsettling than open hostility. She gestured for them to sit, then shuffled through her notes with pointed calm. "Thank you for returning," she began. "We've reviewed the situation carefully." Her phrasing struck him hard. Not accident, not confusion, but situation. That word drew a line, marking the morning as something larger, heavier, almost official. He tried to keep his breath steady. His wife sat rigid beside him, arms crossed, jaw tight. The principal cleared her throat and listed, one by one, the school's main concerns. First, folders with titles that raised alarms, Attack Plan B, Payload Simulation. Second, large volumes of unrelated personal content stored on the device, which disrupted class. And third, unsecured files such as a note literally labeled super secret password. Each phrase fell flat but heavy, clipped into the air like bullet points at a press conference. He caught himself pressing his thumb against his leg, a nervous habit he hadn't felt in years. Words like attack and payload burned back at him.